It's time now for Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Kyle Benedict as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives in Yavapai County. And now here's today's Countywide.
Welcome to Countywide. I'm Paul David. Great to have you in studio today. We remind you March is Archaeology and Heritage Awareness Month, and we have Coconino National Forest archaeologist Travis Bone in studio. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you. With the last name of Bone, I mentioned just before the show, that's very appropriate for what you do for a living. And I thought we'd start off the show with kind of finding out how you decided and got into archaeology. It's quite a field.
It's kind of a strange story. In brief, though, it's actually a second career for me.
Oh, okay.
I have a finance undergraduate degree and was in the business world and actually tore a shoulder up whitewater kayaking and then rode the Grand Canyon. And when I came off that trip, I got my shoulder repaired. And while I was off for 6 weeks, I realized I wanted to change. And so I decided to go back to school and thought about what I wanted to be when I grew up again. And I hadn't done archaeology the first time because my mom had gotten an anthropology degree, and it was really tough to get a job back in the 70s. Mm-hmm. But I looked around and I thought, well, somebody has a job doing archaeology. Why can't I get a job doing archaeology? So I went back to school, got an archaeology degree, and it just sort of found me. I had a fellow student who was doing their thesis on the Kaibab National Forest, and they needed an extra crew member, and so she asked me if I wanted to have a summer job, and I realized that I needed a summer job, and so I went to work for the Kaibab for the summer, and things just snowballed and turned into a permanent position, and here I am.
Wow, what got you to archaeology, though, specifically archaeology?
It's just something I always loved. I mean, I think this is a common story. As a kid, my parents and I spent all of our time hiking and camping all around, particularly in Canyonlands in southern Utah, which of course has so many cliff dwellings, and they're so picturesque. It was just intriguing to me. And so it just sort of was from that love and that interest that I had as a kid.
The desire to know who these people were that built way up here on the side of this mountain. I mean, it's truly amazing. I mean, when you look at like the picture behind us, Montezuma Castle and Tuzagut National Monument, we talked about that earlier this month. And then Sedona's got so many unique formations there as well, and ancient dwellings. I guess I should call them ancient dwellings. Is that good? Ancient dwellings?
Yeah, that is great.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe we should get into some of those because there are several in the Sedona area. It must have been a very picturesque place for them to live. I wonder, do you think maybe they knew they were living in such a fabulous place and that so many people down the road were going to come by Sedona and say, oh my gosh, look at this place?
You know, that's hard to say from our modern perspective. For Native Americans, it's really impossible to separate the sacred and the profane, and so it's all mixed together. And to them, I'm sure that every natural place has natural beauty. Certainly any tribe we talk to, wherever their homeland is, they see extraordinary beauty there. But I have to think that Sedona was perhaps maybe a little special in the area.
Yeah, I would have been thinking jackpot when I stopped there. Yeah. So let me ask you this. What drew the people to the Sedona area?
The Verde Valley is just an amazing grocery store. It's got all kinds of natural resources, and all within a short distance. Because of the rim, you can forage just by moving up and down a few miles. And no matter what the season is, you can pretty much always find food. We've got the perennial water in the creeks and the river here. You move up the slopes, you've got piñons and agave and prickly pear, and it's just limitless. And the occupation here actually goes way, way back. I don't know if people realize that we have quite a bit of evidence for the Clovis people. And so we could have occupation going back to 12,000 BC. There's been, I think, at least 11 reported Clovis points or bases, which is what's diagnostic, found in the Verde Valley. I don't know if those have all been verified, but I know for certain at least 6 have been solidly verified, definite Clovis points. And it just to show how rich the Verde Valley was, that's over half of the Clovis points that have been found on the whole Coconino National Forest.
Okay.
So, over half the points have come from less than a third of the area of the forest. So people have been here since presumably nearly the beginning of people. I'm sure the hunting was great along all the creeks and the rivers, natural gathering.
Would the terrain have been much different then as it is now?
That's a good question. In a broad sense, no.
Okay.
You know, if you're flying over in a plane, it would look pretty much the same. There has been arroyo downcutting, and there's a lot of debate as to how much historic cattle grazing and sheep grazing has had to do with that. So perhaps the arroyos weren't so deep. And the Verde River itself, when the military first got here, they described the Verde River as a broad, meandering stream that was just a mosquito haven. It wasn't sort of this incised kind of stream with banks that we see now. It was just a broad, meandering kind of thing. In fact, that's why they moved the fort from its original location up onto the bluff, was to get away from the mosquitoes, because the malaria was so bad for the soldiers.
Kind of marshy, more marshy, like maybe Tabasi Marsh. You hear Tabasi
Yes.
Marsh, okay, Dead Horse Ranch State Park.
Yes.
Maybe more of that sort of an atmosphere along it?
Exactly,
Okay.
much more like that. So in that respect, there probably have been changes at the ground level where the arroyos are down cut more. But in a broad sense, it would look a lot like it did today. And then depending on where you are in the last 10, 15,000 years, there could have been more or less water. You know, people always talk about how there was more water, there were more springs. And that was true at times, but there were also droughts, and there were great droughts like we are in now, where certainly that stuff would have dried up and it would look very much like it does today.
So we see that historically, where
Yes.
we have abundance of water and then very little water.
Right.
And then I've even heard that maybe the water was some of the reasons the people left the area, that maybe there was too much of a shortage of water, or did they ever leave the area?
We do think that they left the area. Archaeologically, we see, you know, for a couple hundred years, we see what we refer to as the Sanawa culture, which is archaeologists' term for a group of traits. They were building pueblos, they buried their dead in a certain way, they had certain kinds of ceramics. And things sort of go along. We can see slow changes in that. The pottery styles shift a little bit. And then all of a sudden, that disappears out of the archaeological record, right about 1400 actually. And it looks like the vast majority of the people left the Verde Valley. And so we talk about this abandonment, and probably there wasn't a real abandonment. I'm sure some people stayed and went back to the old hunting gathering ways, you know, quit farming, quit agriculture, and started living a more mobile lifestyle, probably joining with the Yavapai, who were probably here at that point, and perhaps the Apache. But most of the Pueblo folks, we do think, moved up north and east, up into the Chavez Pass area, to the Winslow area, to the Homalavi ruins, and eventually to Hopi. And probably others went to Zuni and the other western Pueblos. But by and large, we think that most of the people probably ended up on the Hopi mesas. So that's where we think that their descendants would be, among other people. The Hopi certainly don't all come from here, but some of their ancestors, it definitely came from the Verde. And so why they left in 1400? That's perhaps one of the most interesting questions archaeologists have. The rivers never would have completely dried up. So they always could have farmed. They always would have had perennial water. There could have been some resource depletion in terms of wood, but the valley's so vast, there always would have been some wood. And there's other places in the Southwest where they walked further, like Chaco Canyon doesn't have a lot of wood very close. The farm fields might have become exhausted, but we've done studies and compared the number of people we estimate, which is 5,000 to 8,000 people at the peak in the Verde Valley.
Wow.
To the amount of agricultural land and the production, and it looks like production vastly exceeds the number of people. So even if they had to abandon a third of their farmland, they should have been able to do a rotation. So we think there were some push factors, environmental change. Certainly things could have gotten harder during the droughts. And we think there were some pull factors. So there were things going on up at these other villages, these big villages up to the north. The Katsina cult was getting going, so we have a new religion. It's being very successful. People up there are being successful. And so once a certain number of people move, then you have your relations. You know, all your aunts and uncles have moved on. You want to be with your family. And so there's probably a variety of what we call push and pull factors. things that were bad here, things that were good there.
All right, we have to take a break. Already.
Okay.
Yeah, archaeologist Travis Bone with the Coconino National Forest in studio today. March is Archaeology and Heritage Awareness Month. This is Countywide. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
This was me. And Mom and Dad. And my big brother Alex. And Jack. And this was the day that I learned that sandals get their name from sand. That jellyfish aren't made of jelly. That stars don't just come from the sky. That the ocean is bigger than all of us. This is the day we all got to forget that I was sick. And it changed everything. This was my wish.
I dare you to change the world. Yeah, you. Getting that college education.
I dare you to be somebody important.
Like be a teacher or a reality TV star.
I dare you to stand up here.
To call the shots.
To be a role model.
An inspiration. An innovator.
To be a teacher.
Think you can change my life?
Make me excited about science like you.
Have a career that really means something?
Then do it.
I dare you.
Welcome back to Countywide. I'm Paul David, Coconino National Forest archaeologist Travis Bone in studio with us today. It's March's Archaeology and Heritage Awareness Month. We're going to try to get into a few of the sites that are in the area that are big sites. Pulaski, let's start there. How about that? Pulaski Heritage Site. Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay. And just to start off, before I forget, the Pulaski as well as Hananki and Vibarvi are open from 9:30 to 3 to the public. Pulaski is one that we do request you call and make a reservation because they try and organize people into sort of mini tours.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, plus there's limited parking. And so if they know that there's going to be a big group, they can tell you this isn't a good time to come, you're not going to be able to park. Let's reschedule you for later in the day or a different day or whatever.
Do you know how many it can handle?
I don't off the top of my head.
Okay, but call ahead.
Yeah.
Call ahead for Pulaski.
Yeah, it's not a large number. So Pulaski, you'd want to call ahead. And Pulaski is an interesting site because there's several things there. There's two main destinations that you hike up to. One is the Pueblo or the cliff dwelling, which you can get very close to. Walk up and get a good close look at it.
How big is it? How many people live there? Let's put it that way.
Oh gosh, that's a good question. And this is not an exact number, but I'm going to estimate there's maybe 15, 20 rooms.
Okay.
And so...
That would hold quite a few people.
But at any one time, probably about 15 or 20 people. Because you might have one main living room where a family of 5 or 6 live, but then you'd have several smaller storage rooms, and you might have, say, a ceremonial room if you happen to have a kiva or a community room or something like that. And so it kind of works out that there's 1 to 2 people per room is kind of a rough estimate depending on the size of the Pueblo. So you might have had 20, maybe 30 people there at most at any one time, I would guess. And then there's another short trail that takes you to an incredible rock art panel. And there's rock art there that spans thousands of years. Going back in time, there's quite a lot of Yavapai charcoal drawings, and then Sinawa white painted pictographs, which are really unusual because the paint wears off if it's not protected. And so this is in an alcove, and so there's still the paint there.
Oh, wow.
And then there's also pictographs, painted pictographs from the Archaic period that go back several thousand years, and maybe more than that. There's fine line scratching that is common with the Paleolithic hunter-gatherers.
What are they depicting in the pictures?
It depends. In the older periods, the Paleolithic and the Archaic period, they tend to be just geometrics, and so lines and squiggles and hatches and things like that. In the Pueblo period, we start to get depictions of things that we can recognize. We don't know the meaning, what the people intended, but we can recognize there's quadrupeds like deer and dog-like things and antelope-looking things. Mm-hmm. And there's what we call anthropomorphs, which are human-looking things, and sometimes a mix. You'll get odd-looking human figures with what looks like an extra pair of arms or legs, elongated bodies, and things like that. So they're not always very realistic, mm-hmm. but we can certainly identify that these are things from the environment that they're seeing and they're painting. Okay, so Pulaski, call ahead before you go there, so there's room to do that because it's going to be a tour. V-Bar V. So V-Bar V, in terms of visiting it, it's open. Remember that it's open on the weekends. It's open Friday through Monday. Okay. And people think Monday through Friday, and that's not it. It's the long
Friday
weekend.
Through Monday.
Friday through Monday.
Okay.
And it's a single rock art panel, and it's petroglyphs. So pictographs are painted on. Petroglyphs are pecked or scratched or incised into the rock. And it's a panel, it's a rock cliff with 3 or 4 big panels on it. And there's over 1,000 petroglyphs at V-Bar V. That's going to be pretty rare. Yeah, that's the most petroglyphs or rock art elements at any single site that we know of in the Verde Valley. Oh, wow, okay. So they're just covered. There is a solar calendar there that marks solstice and equinox and perhaps some other times, theoretically maybe the planting time, that's marked in some spirals and some other elements. Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of things there. There's water birds that look like blue herons. It's a really fascinating site. Lots of stuff going on there on those rock art panels. Now, is it possible to have somebody like yourself there that would talk about these things and tell us what we're looking at? So Pulaski and V-Bar V are staffed mainly by volunteers. It's really an incredibly rare thing that we have here in the Verde Valley, this huge group of volunteers. We wouldn't be able to have these sites open without the volunteers. Right. And so when you go, there will always be someone on site, and their number one duty is to protect the site. Sure. That's, the prime directive is to protect the site. And then beyond that is to provide some information to the public. And so, yeah, you're not there on your own just guessing. There's someone there who knows a little bit about it and can describe what's going on. That's great. Okay, and then real quick, the Hananki Heritage Site. So Hananki is a little bit more of a self-directed tour, longer drive, rougher road to get out there. But it's a loop trail. And again, there's both there. There's incredible cliff dwelling and Pueblo rooms. You walk right by the room walls. You shouldn't, please don't, but you could reach out and touch them. You're so close. Mm-hmm. And then there's rock art, and again, the rock art going back, we feel fairly confident into the Paleolithic. So there's 10,000 years of rock art there, sometimes right on top of each other. Sadly, a couple years ago, there was vandalism. Somebody, I remember that, fairly famously scratched into one, and they cut through a Sinawa element, an archaic red element underneath that, and perhaps an archaic or Paleolithic underneath that. So 3 layers and thousands of years they scratched through just with that one stick. Ruined in a moment. Ruined in a moment. Ruined in a moment. But the site is incredible. I mean, just there's rock art all along, Yavapai rock art, pictographs, petroglyphs, and the rooms. It's going to be like just a melting pot for an archaeologist, I imagine, huh? We got to take another break. Travis Bone, archaeologist for the Coconino National Forest, in studio today. This is Countywide, and we will be back in just a couple minutes.
my boy Matt had it good. He had catnip that was off the hook. But one day, he brings a girl home, and she's allergic to cats. Every sneeze was a nail in my coffin. Now I'm in a shelter. It's decent, but they don't even have Wi-Fi.
I'm Jenny Garth, and as a mother of 3, I know kids worry about a lot of things. Getting enough food to eat shouldn't be one of them. But here in America, that is a real worry for 1 in 5 children. Even though we are one of the most food-rich countries in the world, 15 million children don't know where their next meal is coming from. This is unacceptable, and something the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks is working to solve. Instead of accepting that our country lets billions of pounds of surplus food go to waste every year, Feeding America has made it their mission to help families in need by rescuing this food. Through food pantries and meal programs, the nationwide network of food banks provides more than 3 billion meals, serving virtually every community in the United States, including yours. Join me in supporting Feeding America and your local food bank by visiting feedingamerica.org. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're Feeding America.
Welcome back to Countywide. We've got just a couple minutes left in the program. Travis here was telling me the Hununki Heritage Site, you said a decade ago there was some digging there and some interesting stuff came about?
We got a Save America's Treasures grant through the Park Service to build the trail that's there now, and we had to excavate to protect, to mitigate the trail going in. And one of the amazing things that came out was a piece of tie-dyed cloth. And when they dug it up initially, they thought it was just an old cowboy shirt that had gotten buried. But it's this incredible tie-dye cloth, and the way they did it, it came out in a square pattern.
Oh, wow.
It's incredibly rare. There's only been a couple pieces of this found throughout the whole Southwest.
What's it made out of?
Cotton.
Okay.
And the local people were amazing weavers. In fact, here and in the Tonto Basin down around Lake Roosevelt were probably the 2 best weaving centers producing this incredible, incredible cotton cloth, and probably being traded throughout the Southwest. It's probably their number 1.
And how old would that piece of cloth be?
800 to 1,000 years old, roughly.
Buried in dirt for all these years, and it survives everything.
Protected by that cliff overhang.
We could throw our shirt out there and it wouldn't last a year or 2.
If you threw it in an overhang, it would last 1,000 years.
Oh, I suppose. Okay, so it had some protection.
That's why the Southwest is like Egypt.
What colors?
Blue. It was this indigo blue.
Indigo blue.
Yeah.
I'll be darned. Okay, so again, Pulaski Heritage Site, call ahead.
Yes.
The phone numbers are all on our website, coconinonationalforest.us. I think you can go to, I know, I don't want to put you on the spot.
Google it.
Google it. That's what I did. I went Coconino National Forest archaeological sites, and all this came up. B-Bar-B, don't need a reservation, and that's the Friday through Monday. Through Monday.
Correct.
And then Hununki is open daily from, you say, 9 to 3:30?
I believe it's 9:30 to 3.
9:30 to 3.
But it'll be on the website.
Okay, 9:30 to 3. But yeah, go out there and check out some of these local sites and educate yourself. It'd be very interesting. All right. Travis, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks.
We're going to have Travis back. He was telling me a little bit about ancient trails and roads in the area, and I thought it was really interesting. So we'll get you back in to talk about that somewhere down the road here. That's today's Countywide. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.